Okay, so I had to switch to the ultra wide lens for this one because this thing is absolutely redonkulously large. It is redonkulously heavy. Thankfully, it was not redonkulously expensive because it doesn't work. This is an Intercolor 3651. 51 is a good number because that's about what this thing weighs. It's probably more than that actually. Man, it's just huge. I don't know like what they were thinking going this big. This machine was made by Intelligent Systems Corporation, which was also the parent company of Compucolor. The Compucolor machines are extremely collectible. There's the Compucolor, they call it the Compucolor 1, and then the Compucolor 2. I've only ever seen maybe like 2 or 3 Compucolor 2s come up for sale, and they were billed as the first true color computer. I think they were announced in 1976. This machine, as far as I understand, is basically the functional successor to the Compucolor 2. So instead of having the TV that they shoved everything into, they actually built a proper case for it. And you've got a floppy drive here, 5 1/4 inch. You've got the Compucolor keyboard, which you could get in several different varieties. Sometimes they'll have a bunch of function keys down the left here, which are like super multicolor. You can see many of the keys have different colors. Compucolor, I guess, really wanted you to know they were in the business of color computers. Yeah, this is one of the lower models of keyboard. I've seen pictures of machines that have like the full extended keyboard. There's like another row, I think, of keys across the top here, a row down here, and I think a numeric keypad or something on this side, if you can imagine that. This one's not quite that fancy, but yeah, I believe it's based on the Intel 8080. I think it has maybe 4 or 8 kilobytes of memory built in. And yeah, this is what I got. It was originally advertised as being in working condition, but the seller didn't actually test it first. And then when he did, he discovered, no, it wasn't working. So I got a big deal on it. And yeah, it came with a few discs. We've got a program disc here of some sort, of all programs. I don't know what that means. ISC, all program disc. I guess that's a copy. And then a demo disc. So I'm gonna hang on to those for dear life, because if they still work, they might be the only things that I can actually do something with this machine. Assuming I get it working. The problem with this machine is the motherboard is down below the CRT, and there is no easy way to work on it. There's no way to, you know, some of my other machines that are designed this way, you can pull the motherboard out on a tray, you can set it aside, you can work on it alongside the computer. This one you can't. You got to work with the CRT, high voltages right in your face. So it's just simply not putting out any power on the +5 or +12 volt rails, which could be just a shorted capacitor somewhere. I've had that happen on a few of my machines. It could be bad voltage regulators, could be a bad power supply. I don't think the power supply entirely is bad, because I can see the CRT heater warming up in the back there when I've got the lid off. But yeah, just an absolutely massive computer from, I think it was around 1980, 81, somewhere in there. But yeah, you will see this machine at some point in the future once I start investigating it. For now, it's just kind of pretty to look at. Okay, here is another machine that has been on my want list for eons. And again, it's one of those ones that it's just super rare and doesn't come up very often. This is the Mindset. This is an 8186 based computer, sort of a PC compatible. I say sort of because it has some compatibility issues, as do most of the 186 machines. And it is unique in many ways. Number one, just the look of the thing. It's actually featured in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. It was considered good enough for that. And it also is known for its high performance graphics capabilities, which for the time, you know, when we were still dealing with 4-color CGA, it was actually quite impressive. It can put out 16 colors on screen out of a palette of 512. And depending on whether you believe the rumors of the time, this might have been the Atari ST. Apparently Jack Tramiel, while he was turning Atari into his personal revenge vehicle against Commodore, actually had a look at this machine and considered it as potentially their next generation computer. Didn't happen, unfortunately, for Mindset. Mindset turned out to be a very short-lived company. They only hung in for about 2 years and then called it quits. Classic story of great product, but not enough money behind it to really promote it and get it out there. So there's not very many that were made, and there's even fewer of them to collect. I have ended up with 3 of these machines quite by accident, and luckily 3 different models. This is the original model. There's actually 4 models in total, and I have 2 of those in addition to this one. I have the video production unit and the professional video graphics system. Now, we're not going to get too detailed into this one right now just because I'm doing an actual video on the Mindset, and you'll be seeing all 3 of the different variants that I have in that video, along with some of the accessories, and we'll try to push the limits of the machine and see what it can do in the way of video production with gen locking and superimposing text and graphics onto screen. So I am kind of beavering away at that one, but it's a big project, and there's a few things that aren't getting along at the moment. All right, next up we have this binder that says Delilah on it. This was another cheapy pickup. It's made by the Software Establishment, and this is actually an enhanced version of CP/M for the Xerox 820. So what this does, reputedly, is it massively speeds up disk operations on the Xerox 820. One of the things that they identified, CP/M, they have a big explainer, and I will digitize this and put it all up on a website that I'm working on. And from what I understand, because CP/M was sort of the default operating system of the day, a lot of companies didn't make a lot of effort to optimize it. They just kind of did the bare minimum to make it work on their system. And on the 820, there's a bit of a performance hit with that. And so what these guys did is they said, okay, we're going to re-optimize it specifically for Xerox 820 hardware. And yeah, they claimed that it sped things up by about a factor of 3 or 5, I forget what they said. But yeah, it's a nice little binder. It's kind of got a suede to it, which is unusual. And it's on a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk, which unfortunately I don't have a disk drive for my Xerox 820s yet, but I will try to dump it online somewhere so that a permanent copy is out there. This is their manual, Delilah version 2, operator's manual. Out of Westlake Village, California, like most of these companies, looks like 1982. And yeah, here's their background. Shortly after the dark ages of microcomputers about 5 years ago, there crawled into the world an animal called CP/M. CP/M was somewhat related to the other operating systems for larger computers, but it was the first to survive the whimsical environment of microcomputers. So yeah, this is kind of like tongue-in-cheek. And they sort of explain the problem with CP/M with specific machines, where they say basically in terms of setting up CP/M for use on a particular computer, the simplest approach is to modify as little as possible of what digital research supplies with CP/M, and this is what many manufacturers, including Xerox, have done. But an operating system's major job is to be an interface between a program and the computer, and a computer as well designed as the Xerox 820 deserves better. So yeah, they're basically just modifying CP/M a little bit to be more efficient. And this sort of explains why you would want it. Speed, sophisticated buffer management algorithm allows disk read operations to take place 2 to 3 times faster than before, so that's pretty impressive. Economy, you can use printers other than the Diablo Xerox printer, which I didn't realize the 820 had that limitation. Flexibility, you can install 2 serial printers. You can now use 2 serial ports to run at any of the standard baud rates. And yeah, you can use the 820 basically as a terminal to connect to a remote system, which is kind of cool. And yeah, the rest is just sort of detailing what it is, what you can do. And typically you would just run their, I think it's called generate, and that would create the essential boot disk. And then it has the terminal and it looks like a decom, I'm not sure what that program is. A directory program which gives alphabetized output. Well, that's kind of nice. And then format, which is very much like the Xerox init program, but with several bugs removed which prevented the original from working properly. That's always a plus. And yeah, you can do your setup here. You can set up your baud rate and everything for your terminal. Yeah, it's just very cool. And it was cheap. Nobody seemed to want it. And I thought, I didn't see it archived anywhere. So I figured I'd better get my hands on this and save it, because otherwise who knows what would happen. It might end up in the garbage. So yeah, that is Delilah, the high performance operating system and configuration program for the Xerox 820. Okay, next up is a little newsletter called Bridge. This is a newsletter that was devoted to Digital Group owners, and they say over the voids. Digital Group, if you've seen my video on that, you know, is a short-lived but really interesting early microcomputer company. And these guys basically formed in support of users of that system, you know, trying to keep it going as long as they could. This was something that often happened to a lot of orphan computer systems. And yeah, I don't typically collect a lot of documentation, but I have been doing more of it lately, especially with companies like the Digital Group, where there isn't really that much documentation to begin with. I don't know if I've ever seen a copy of Bridge archived anywhere online. I just read about it doing some research. Now, interestingly, it shows the volume number, but it doesn't show a date anywhere on it. Yeah, typically these would be basically just loaded with tips for Digital Group users, support. They would typically have a classified section of some sort. Let's see here. Actually, so yeah, this is actually talking not about the Digital Group, but about the Micromint, which is a machine that I have, and I showed it in a previous Unfridging episode. It's the Z80 single board. And yeah, it looks like it sells for about 29 bucks back then, which is a good price. And then we've got a letter, Richard Bourgeois, ophthalmology. I love how everybody's putting stuff on their own letterhead here. That's kind of funny. Well, there's a date, 1981. So yeah, this is a couple years after the company collapsed, 100%. Oh, look at all these little miniaturized photocopies of letters. So yeah, these are all just people kind of giving tips to one another on, you know, things you can do to improve the machine. I think I saw something in here about fixing some problems with the FIDEC unit that they had. Wow, it seemed kind of like attorney at law. I wonder how many of these guys are still around. Yeah, here's the one where they're talking about working on the FIDEC source code. FIMON is the operating system for that. And some sample programs, always popular. Yeah, just a lot of letters back and forth between different users. It's a nice quality newsletter. They definitely went to some trouble with binding it and stuff. But yeah, you see you got your help wanted. Help wanted being for, you know, I need help trying to do stuff. I have DG's 256 by 256 graphics board. Ooh. I wonder if that's the color one that I've been looking for forever. And then we have, of course, a classified section with stuff for sale. A Digital Group 64K with single-sided, single-density 8-inch Shugart drives, Selectric printer and assortment software, $4,000. Holy smokes. In 1981, yeah, that would have been a lot. Oh, a Digital Group Bytemaster. That's the portable one that I really, really want. You just can't get them. $1,500. Yeah, that's still a fair amount of money in 1981. But yeah, that's $2,000. And this is for a computer from a company that's defunct. And the computer was designed like several years ago. So yeah, computers really held their value back then. And that's one of the things with my dad's, with that Toshiba I showed earlier. The reason I don't have our original one is because my dad traded it in. He traded it and the AT in and got something else. And you know, that's how it was. Computers held on to their value. But yeah, that is the Bridge newsletter. Okay, next up is this random electronic stuff that I picked up for very little money. I think it was like 20 or 30 bucks from what I remember. And yeah, it came in a bunch of boxes by the Pako Corporation. No idea who they are. I did kind of look it up online, and it seems like there was some sort of machinery oriented sort of company. And yeah, what I got was basically a bunch of boards just like this. And I have no idea what they actually do. They appear to be computer boards. I got these. There was a power supply. There's also this backplane extender card so that you can basically put the card up here and I guess work on it. But yeah, I really don't know if this is actually a computer in its own right, or if it's just an embedded system that was used for some kind of manufacturing purposes. You can see we've got a NEC 8080 CPU there. So definitely has a microprocessor. It's a nice white microprocessor. There's actually two of these boards. They're exactly the same. And yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. So I don't know what the deal is there. It appears to have CPU and some 2111 RAM. I don't see a UART or anything, although one could potentially go there. And it looks like you could have potentially some ROM there. What else have we got here? They just come in these boxes like this. And this is a ROM board. And you can see they're all the same bus design. It looks like they're keyed differently though, which is interesting. They've actually cut out key pins. I guess maybe the board's going to a specific place. When I'm looking at these, they do remind me an awful lot of Tektronix gear. Tektronix always had a very neat organization to their equipment, and they also used a very neat font. You know, everything was very well organized on tech stuff. It just has a Tektronix-y kind of feel to it. I guess the thing that will tell us what this actually is the contents of these ROMs, which I do have the ability to dump, and I think I will do that as a separate video. I'll take these off, dump them, and see if I can find out anything, maybe see if I can power this thing up. But yeah, if anybody recognizes this, let me know. It was just, initially I was just looking at it as basically a source of badly needed spare parts, because I do have machines that use these white ceramic 8080s, and I also have machines that use these 2111s, which are getting kind of hard to find nowadays. But yeah, that's an interesting one. And again, it's by Pako. All right, well, you can probably guess from the front of the box what our next piece is. This is an I/O board kit from a company called MicoDaSys. I think it's MicoDaSys or MicoDaSys. I'm not 100% sure on that one. The story on this company is they were a producer of S100 gear. I think they started off like many S100 companies producing boards basically for upgrades of other machines. And then they eventually came out with system components of their own. And I think, if I read the story correctly, they originally wanted to be called MicroSys, but that name had already been taken. So they decided to change the name to MicoDaSys. So yeah, this is a kit for their I/O board. I actually have their CPU board here. Yeah, like I said, it's an S100 board, and it is Motorola 6800. There's some EEPROMs on board here for the system monitor. I think that's all it is. I think it's actually a pretty powerful system monitor from what I recall. And yeah, a little bit of memory, which this board doesn't have. Yeah, pretty much just your standard semi-proprietary S100 based computer gear. I don't know if there were other boards that they made. I'm pretty sure there are, but I think basically for a system, but I think for a minimal system, you just needed this card and the I/O card. Somebody out there might be able to correct me on that. So yeah, this just came up real cheap, and yeah, here we go. So this is clearly a kit board. Now, I don't know if it shipped with the sockets already installed like this. I'm kind of doubting it. I think this is somebody kind of starting a kit and not finishing it, or maybe they did finish it and they ripped it apart for some reason. But yeah, this is the system I/O card. Yeah, parallel serial I/O card, so it can do both parallel and serial in and out. And it even has a nice little prototyping area over here as well, which is kind of cool. In addition to the card, we also have an original invoice from the company, and I'm just going to obscure the fellow's name because I have no idea if he's still around and still living at that address. It looks like it retailed for... I can't really read it because it's kind of smudged now. It's probably around $100 or so. But yeah, that's kind of cool to have an original invoice from the company. The date is the 7th of January 1980. And it's called the 4PS-K IO kit. So yeah, that's the packing slip for it. And then there was just a bunch of random bits in the box here. These are probably 6821s if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And just some random support chips that you need. And it's kind of all falling apart in the box here, unfortunately. It looks like they have, this must be an EEPROM. It's wrapped in foil. And then we just have some other random support ICs that are floating around. So there's probably enough here to get this board up and running. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to do one day, is eventually build a MicoDaSys based system and just kind of see how it works. I don't recall 100%. I think it's a terminal based system. I don't think that it has video and keyboard input and output, but I could be wrong on that one. I don't know how long MicoDaSys stuck around for. I think for at least a few years. And you know, it's just nice to have a piece of history from a slightly more obscure company like this, especially something that's in really nice condition like this IO board. It's got a little bit of, I don't know if that's rust or splatter or what that is. Blood. Hope it's not blood. But yeah, that is the MicoDaSys IO board. Okay, so if you're a serious Commodore fan, you're probably getting all hot and bothered right now by this, triggered to the max. You're like, oh, he's got a CBM2. And if you're a really eagle-eyed observer, you probably are going, oh my God, he's got a P500. How did this happen? Unfortunately, while it is a P500 case, there is no P500 computer in it. It was a case that I picked up for pretty darn cheap. Yeah, the case is visually quite appealing. And you know, we've got our arrow keys, full row of function keys. You know, most of the familiar keys that you would see on a Commodore later on, including the Petsky graphic keys. Yeah, just a really pleasant design, nice big wedge shape. It's quite heavy even without the actual computer in it. And I was thinking, you know, I wasn't thinking anything. I was like, you know what? It's just nice to have something that looks like a P500 on my shelf, even if I can't do anything with it. And I don't think it's ever actually been used. It looks incredibly clean. Like there's no dirt whatsoever on the keys that I can make out. I think it may have just been a new old stock case that never got filled. The CBM2 series was basically Commodore's replacement for the PET. And then it ended up being superseded and totally replaced by the VIC and the 64 later on. And the P500 is kind of sought after because it is the color PET. I believe there was a business version of this as well, the B500. I don't recall exactly what the differences are, but yeah, this is a fairly highly sought after machine. I have no idea how many were made. I think probably into the low thousands, most likely. And yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, having any piece of it, I'm more than happy to take. The whole machine usually on eBay will sell for easily north of $1,000. So yeah, it's just not common. It's not something you come across. But there were some that were made in the States, and this is actually a North American one because it's 120 volts, 60 hertz. So yeah, but we can open it up here. Just take that lid off. And yeah, that's the back side of our keyboard. Just our cables hanging loose. And then we've got what looks like pretty much a brand new power supply just sitting right there. And if you look at like the standoffs, like there's no signs of anything being screwed into it. Usually you'll see like little scratches, you know, where the board is kind of rubbing up against them, but there's just nothing there. And the power supply, it's not easy to tell through the grill, but it looks clean. Like this thing has not been sucking in any dirty air. So yeah, I really think this is probably a never built unit. And my thought on this, what I wanted to do is I wanted to steal the power supply from it because I have a B128 that is missing the power supply, and I believe the power supplies on these are identical. And then what I was thinking was I might get a Raspberry Pi and put that in here because there is an emulator available for that basically simulates the P500. And if I could find a way to interface the keyboard and everything, then functionally I would have a P500, even if the board inside wasn't actually a real P500 board. I doubt I'll ever see an actual P500 board come up for sale. They're just not the kind of thing that is numerous enough that there would be a lot of spares. I mean, it's possible. I always kind of look, but I really, really doubt it. So the next best thing for this is to just outfit it with something to give it some degree of functionality, and yeah, leave it at that. But yeah, I think that's what I'm going to probably aim to do, is see if I can Raspberry Pi it and make it a functional P500 semi-replica, I guess. Yeah.